Hello, my name is Glen Davenport. I'm Pastor Sean's father-in-law. And he has given me the privilege of giving you a short devotional. And so we're going to look at Joshua chapter 1, verses 6 to 9. The setting is the children of Israel are at the entrance to the promised land. God has taken Moses away, so the task of taking them in is in his hands. So let me read from Joshua chapter 1, verses 6 to 9. Be strong and courageous, because you will lead these people to inherit the land I swore to their forefathers to give them. Be strong and very courageous. Be careful to obey all the law my servant Moses gave you. Do not turn from it to the right or to the left, that you may be successful wherever you go. Do not let this book of the law depart from your mouth. Meditate on it day and night, so that you may be careful to do everything written in it. Then you will be prosperous and successful. Have I not commanded you? Be strong and courageous. Do not be terrified. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. In order for Joshua to accomplish the Lord's command to take the land that was promised to Moses, Joshua had to obey, according to this passage, 4 commands. First of all, he says, be strong and courageous. This command seemed to be so vital that God repeated it again and again in this chapter. In verse 6, be strong and courageous. Verse 7, be strong and very courageous. Verse 9, have I not commanded you, be strong and courageous? And then he ends the chapter with the same words, only be strong and courageous. Be strong and courageous, not weak and waffling. We can only be strong and courageous when we trust in what God has said to us, when we trust in his promises. God promised first to Moses and then to Joshua that he would give the land of Israel to them. He would give them victory over their enemies. Their responsibility was to have courage and take him at his word, to believe in what he said. Courage is not the opposite of fear. Courage is the byproduct of faith. A courageous person is not someone who is fearless, but one who can control his or her fear that they naturally have. But there are other kinds of courage also. For example, there's moral courage, which is the ability to do right in spite or in face of opposition or discouragement. Having moral courage means being an honest person. It means having integrity. It means that you don't cheat on your test. You don't cheat on your taxes. And you don't cheat on your spouse. Moral courage is honoring the vows you made to your wife or your husband when you said, for better, for worse, for richer, for poor, in sickness and in health, to love and to cherish until death do we part. 63 years ago, my wife and I said those vows, and God has helped us to keep those vows all this time. So God says, first of all, be courageous. Be without fear. Believe in my word. Take me at my word. And then the second thing he says to Joshua is, be careful to obey all the law my servant Moses gave you. In other words, he's asking for complete obedience, total obedience. Obey all the law. Be careful to obey all of God's instruction. Now, we can only obey when we truly believe that God's way is best. Just as Joshua and Israel were to obey all the law, we're to implement all of God's word into our lives. I read an interesting quote by Ravi Zacharias. It goes like this: "The reason we have 17,000 pages in our law books is because we cannot follow just 10 lines on a tablet made of stone. If we were to do that, if we were to obey every word of those 10 commandments, then we wouldn't have to have 17,000 pages in our law books." We cannot treat God's word as a buffet line in which we pick and choose what we like best. I was in Oaxaca, Mexico teaching, and my students took me to a buffet where there were 100 typical dishes from all over Mexico. And I could pick and choose what I thought I would like. Now, this is where my illustration kind of goes awry, because if I were to choose all of those 100 typical dishes, I wouldn't have been able to waddle out of the place. Well, God calls Moses to complete and total obedience, but also consistent obedience. He says, "Do not let this book depart from your mouth." He's not to vary from the law. He was to obey the entire law and do so every day. It was not to be a weekend religion that made no difference in daily living. The third thing that God says to Joshua is this: meditate on it. Speaking of the word, meditate on it day and night so that you may be careful to do everything written in it. Then you will be prosperous and successful. In other words, make God's word a part of your life. Study it daily. Meditate on it. We can only and will only study God's word when we long to hear his voice. So if you want to hear God speak to you, get in the word. The last thing he says to Joshua is this: do not be terrified. Do not be discouraged, for the Lord your God will be with you wherever you go. In other words, be totally and completely convinced that God is with you. Do not become afraid or discouraged. Now, we can only refrain from fear and discouragement when we are totally certain that God is with us. I love Psalm 23, and especially the part where it says, "Even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil. For you are with me, your rod and your staff, they comfort me." Now, we usually quote that at a funeral service to console and to help those who are grieving the loss of a loved one. But now that's fine, but I think the real intent of this is found in the words "walk through." In other words, the psalmist is saying, whatever I'm facing, I'm going to get through it because I know that the Lord is with me. And I think that's the real intent of those words. I'm going to get through it because God is at my side. So to conclude, have courage. Take God at his word. Follow his instructions, all of his instructions. Make it a part of your life. And then be assured of his presence every step of the way. God bless you and have a great day.